I'm Kiyan.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast with an annoying soundtrack. Because this week we watched The Sea Devils.
Which was written by Malcolm Hulke.
Directed by Michael Bryant.
And aired in February through April of 72.
Yeah, so we should explain the intro, while we're here at the intro, that this story ran so massively over budget on its visual effects, they didn't have enough money to hire the usual composer for the incidental music, which was Derek Sherwin, which we haven't mentioned, but he's been composing the music since basically the beginning of the Third Doctor era. But they didn't have enough money to hire him for this serial, so they basically went to the Radiophonic Workshop, who are the guys who kind of do all the techno music and also put together the arrangement of the theme, and were like, here's the money we have left, can you make us some music? So they did, and we got this weird techno, 70s techno vibe music thing.
Basically a regression back to what we had in the first and second Doctor's run, if you want to think of it like that.
Wasn't that bad. I felt it was played way too loud, though. If it had played, I think, softer and it acted more as background music rather than, hey, we're going to play this techno and blast it in your face, then I think it could have been good. I kind of liked the music itself.
I didn't. I just thought it was way too abrasive. I think volume was part of it, but at the same time, it went from, like, you know, potentially a tense scene to all of a sudden techno blare things that I didn't like. And I was listening to this with headphones too, so yeah.
Rest in peace, your ears. So yeah, this was written by Malcolm Hulke, like we mentioned, and it features a lot of those moral ambiguities that we keep seeing in his serials.
Yeah, the storyline was lifted, I'm gonna say, from a past serial.
You can just say it was the Silurians. You don't have to, like, be oblique about it.
Well, yeah, I guess we do kind of spoil everything right at the beginning usually, so yeah. All right.
Well, I mean, I guess we should also mention that they asked Malcolm Hulke to bring back the Silurians. He's like, well, I don't want to reuse the same villain. That's why he made the Sea Devils. So...
yeah, they're basically the same thing, so good job, Malcolm Hulke.
I guess, but I really enjoyed this serial.
I thought it was mediocre at best.
I really liked it.
But we'll see. Anyway, it starts off with the Doctor and Joe going to visit the Master at he's being kept at some high security facility.
Yeah, he's being kept on an island prison. Really want to be sure he's not getting it out, you know?
Yeah, but he's being treated like royalty too.
Well, yeah, but you find out why later.
Yeah. I get the feeling, though, that even if, I guess we're just going to say it now, even if he wasn't scheming, but with Trenchard, that he still would have been treated like this, because they blatantly showed the Doctor and Joe his treatment. Like, they didn't try and hide it, so...
Well, he is... you know, he can hypnotize people, and we don't really know if that whole, hey, all the guards here are hypnosis-proof is true, because maybe he hypnotized the guards into just going along with the plan, you know, so... We don't know. Maybe he could have hypnotized all of them. He's
still hanging out in a pretty fun-looking room. Lots of accommodations.
Well, I mean, he's there for life, so... I guess they were like, well, I guess we can give you a TV and books.
Watch clangers. But we'll get into that. Anyway, the Doctor and Joe are talking with Trenchard, and the Doctor... We just briefly touched on this a second ago, but the Doctor mentions that the Master can hypnotize people, so they better watch out for that. But Trenchard says, no, we have that all covered. See, all our guards are hypnosis-proof. So they send in a guard, and lo and behold, the Master tries his hypnosis, and it doesn't work.
Or so we think, but we just assume it doesn't work.
For now.
Then the Doctor decides he wants to go in and talk to the Master, and he goes in. The Master's like, yeah, I'm totally a good guy now, Doctor. Like, let's work together and stuff. The Doctor is not buying it.
Which he shouldn't.
Well, I mean, yeah. But, well, I mean, maybe. the dialogue here kind of indicates that the Master and Doctor were once friends back on their home planet.
Yeah, it's flat out stated. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure he tells Joe like, "Hey, we used to be allies, or at least
Buddies.
buddies." I
Which
guess
is
it would be the other
interesting.
way around, friends or at least allies. But
Yeah.
you know.
Which is interesting because from what we've seen of the Master and the Doctor, they seem to be reluctant to work together, so to speak.
Well, they probably had some sort of falling out that hopefully we'll learn about later. They seem
knows?
to be setting something up
What?
as they.
You think they're setting something up and then hoping for a payoff in this show?
I know it's stupid, but I'm holding out that slight bit of hope that they'll pull through.
I'm surprised you still hold out hope for this show. I mean, it hits its high. This is around the era where it kind of hits its highest, is the end of the third into the fourth Doctor's run, and then it kind of starts tapering off as we hit 5, 6, 7, and then it gets cancelled.
Well, that actually kind of brings up a point that I'm surprised I forgot to mention last week, which is that the third Doctor, we briefly touched on this, has slowly become more likable, but I felt Curse of Peladon was the major turning point where, like, okay, now I actually do like the third Doctor.
Yeah, this whole season kind of is becoming a whole renaissance for his character. It kind of appeared in Day of the Daleks, and then we got a big hit in Curse of Peladon, and then this serial continuing the themes of Curse of Peladon in regards to, the Doctor and Joe.
Yeah, and I think Pertwee has maybe fallen into his sort of, I don't want to say niche, but his groove, I guess. I guess it's a worse word, but his ideal portrayal of the third Doctor.
Yeah. We could talk about that
Only
more.
took 2 seasons. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, at least there was a payoff for that. At least they didn't just leave him as this obnoxious jerk for his whole run. I mean, that would have sucked.
But then again, he's still kind of a jerk later on in this serial. But I actually kind of liked that because it's not like a complete 180 with his character, and he was actually doing it in.
It was kind of justified in this serial.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
But anyway, back to where we were in the episode. The Doctor leaves the Master, and the Master makes a request for the Doctor to come and chat every so often. And the Doctor's like, yeah. And he leaves. He leaves with Joe, and they leave separately, I guess, because the Doctor goes and mysteriously hands a guy money for his boat, and then he goes around to this naval base that he's heard about that's on the island. I guess it was on the same island as the fort, because Joe just gets on a scooter and goes down there immediately following the Doctor's departure.
I thought it was like just on a nearby island or something. Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I thought until Joe just got that scooter from that guy and then showed up at the naval base later. Which I thought the only way that could be explained away is if they were on the same island. And then I was like, but why would you put the person on the same island as a naval base?
I just assumed she got on a boat at some point. I guess, and just took the scooter with her. I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose.
But we don't really know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Doctor goes off to this naval base because he's heard about some recent sinkings of ships in the area.
Which we actually saw right at the beginning, just before we see Doctor and Joe. There's a ship, and they go, abort, mayday, mayday. And they just kind of disappear, I guess.
And was it in episode 1 where we find out Trenchard is working with the Master, or was that later?
No, it's not till episode 2, I think. Because episode 1, the next thing that happens is the Doctor and Hart kind of have not a heart-to-heart, kind of a discussion.
Maybe if it was Hartnell.
Wouldn't that have been fantastic? But anyway, it's not really a falling out, but they have a disagreement over whether or not something is like intentionally stealing the ships, or if the ships are just going missing by coincidence. But the Doctor figures that something's going on with the fort nearby. And
Hart is the captain, or
I think he's the leader of the naval base.
Yeah,
he's the guy in charge.
That. He probably has some sort of official rank, but I don't know what it is.
According to the wiki.
Huh.
Also, the HMS Sea Spite is his ship, apparently.
Yeah, I thought that was an odd name. Sea Spite.
Spite the seas.
cut off the sea to spite your... I don't know. I don't know
What?
where I'm going with this. You know that expression? Cut off your nose to spite your face or something?
No, I don't.
Really? Huh.
I just learned all these expressions from you, apparently, on this show.
What was the one last week? Time in the sun?
Yeah, that one.
Anyway. Meanwhile, there's another base thing.
Yeah, it's the sea fort that the Doctor is going to.
Yeah, I didn't know where that was either. I'm assuming it was on a nearby island,
Yeah, I think it was on a separate island from the prison. I think it wasn't an island. I think it was a fort that was specifically constructed in the ocean.
Yeah, like a man-made structure, right?
Yeah. And there was two guys on the fort, they had decommissioned the fort prior, but there were two guys on the fort who were converting it into a radio listening station, I guess.
And one of the guys just wants to laze around and play board games all day, and the other guy actually wants to do some work, but they hear some mysterious goings-on around. So the one guy who actually wants to take action goes investigating, and he dies.
Yeah, he gets killed by something.
Yeah, so let it be known that hard work and motivation are never a good thing.
No, don't believe that. That's terrible advice.
Well, look what happened to this guy.
Well, I mean, if the Doctor wasn't hardworking, he'd have died in the first serial. He would have been instantly killed by those cavemen. Just be like, nah, I'm not gonna help you make fire. All right, guess we're just gonna kill you, Doctor. End of show. Cancelled. Episode 1.
Well, 2.
Yeah, I guess. Or, well, maybe he would have just been like, maybe they wouldn't have even traveled in time if he wasn't hardworking. So like, Ian and Barbara, they're on the TARDIS. I'm too lazy to get you out. Come on in. Come on down. You won your very own TARDIS. Do, 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 do. Okay, we're getting way off topic. So the Doctor and Joe decide to go to the fort because the fort happens to be exactly in the center of all the ships that have disappeared. So they decide to go to the fort, and they get there and they find the dead guy. Then they're attacked by the thing that killed the dead guy, presumably. And then episode 1 ends.
And according to the wiki that I'm looking at right now, they're attacked by a Silurian lookalike, but the so-called Sea Devils in this serial...
It's the most tangential lookalike ever.
Yeah. They're basically only... related in terms of visuals by the fact that, okay, their colors are slightly similar and they're vaguely reptilian.
I think you can see where the influence came from, but I think they blew it. Not blew it like they messed up, like blew it out of proportion in a certain direction.
Well, my main concern, I guess we're going to talk about their design now, and I guess we should describe it before getting into this. So basically they're the same color, presumably the same stature as the Silurians and everything.
Well, the Silurians were green and the Sea Devils were like brownish.
They were brownish green. Kind of the same.
Yeah.
They actually looked more like the subspecies Silurian in terms of color. Like the dinosaur-looking thing from the Silurians.
Yeah.
But they wore these blue robes, I guess, with a white sash. And they didn't have the third eye like the Silurians. And basically, I guess they were kind of just going for an aquatic version of the Silurians. My main problem was that these guys didn't look very aquatic. And in the scenes where you actually do see them in water, they look like they're stumbling around and aren't able to move very well.
I think that was because of the clothes.
Yeah, probably. I guess the actors just had a hard time.
Yeah.
Which is pretty stupid. I guess they probably could have just had them go in the nude like the original Silurians.
I guess. I think the costume extended under those clothes, and I think the fact that they looked like they were stumbling out of the water like drunk people during an earthquake, that on the fact that it was hard to move in the costumes already, and then you're making them walk out of the ocean.
Yeah.
There's kind of a suspension of disbelief there, I guess.
Yeah, I think they could have gone without the blue robes. And
I will agree, the blue robes are kind of unnecessary.
And they sounded like what the Ice Warriors originally sounded like.
Yeah, except with more echo applied.
Yeah, and there were a few
Like
instances.
a Dalek Ice Warrior hybrid thing.
Yeah,
That's kind of what I
guess.
imagined it as.
Yeah, the Daleks do kind of have that echo going on. There were
Called ring modulation, if you're curious. I found that out while I was applying the Dalek effect to our voice 2 episodes ago. Continue.
God, what was I going to? Oh, right. There were a few instances that I think were major lines that I didn't understand. I just couldn't understand what they were saying. But that was later on, so I'll mention those when we get there.
They didn't really talk much
until the final 2 episodes. They didn't really do much until the final 2 episodes, really.
And I think that's where the moral ambiguity in this serial comes in, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So episode 2, the Doctor and Joe run away from... No, turns out the other guy shows up and sort of saves them from the Sea Devil, or the Sea Devil wasn't there. I wasn't really sure what was happening in the scene.
Yeah, either way, they confront the guy who survives, and he's pretty much gone over the deep end.
Hey, can you blame him? He's now the only guy on this fort.
I don't blame him.
Has died.
Don't blame him at all. But the Doctor and Joe are understandably really suspicious now, so they go back to the base and they talk to Hart about what just happened, how one of the guys just died. And
Hart, they don't get back to base yet because the helicopter has to come and pick him up first. First, they have to make that makeshift calling device, which comes after the Doctor actually sees a Sea Devil, runs back, and then tells Joe about the creature he saw. Joe then makes a connection to the Silurians because apparently the brig had been telling her about the Silurian incident.
Right, the brig doesn't show up at all in this serial, by the way.
Which is weird, but I guess maybe Nicholas Courtney is just on a break. The brig wasn't really needed in this serial, so I'm glad they didn't try to shoehorn him in or something.
You know what would have been funny is if at the end the brig just showed up out of nowhere, killed all the Silurians, and was like, don't worry guys, it's all good. We can all just go home.
That would have been terrible.
In reference to the last Silurian serial.
No. But the way they referenced him doing that later, I think, was good.
They didn't straight out reference it. They kind of...
They did.
They reference it,
They did, because the Master specifically references it when he's trying to convince the Sea Devils not to trust the humans.
Yeah, he says the Doctor killed all... the Doctor
tried to save them but failed. And they all got killed. The Doctor says, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We always seem to jump ahead. We're so trigger happy. Yeah, the Doctor...
Just like everyone in episode 6. Anyway, continue.
The Doctor reveals that you can turn a radio into a one-way radio receiver into a transmitter if you just, reverse some things.
The polarity of the neutron... No, that's not until later.
So he does that. Captain Hart has already gotten suspicious since the boat that the Doctor and Joe came in and kind of disappeared, which the Doctor and Joe also witnessed get blown up while they're on the fort. But anyway, so the Hart sends a helicopter for them. Joe and the Doctor, predictably grateful for that, and they get the heck off of that.
No, they just deny it. They're like, no, we're not leaving.
And they go to Hart. Yeah, so they go to Hart and tell him about the Sea Devils, and
he doesn't believe them. And then what's-his-face, the guy who survived, calls, and Hart's assistant comes in. She's like, we have a call from the fort, and it's this guy, and he's delirious. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's just crazy.
Didn't they take him to the medical bay? Because the Doctor, knocked him out with that chemical, and then I just assumed they took him for the medical bay. But it doesn't really matter because we never see him again anyway.
Yeah. He deserves his own spin-off. No, he doesn't.
Anyway, meanwhile, at the prison, the Master has Trenchard wrapped around his finger because Trenchard is just bringing him naval plans because he wants him to.
Yeah, I don't know when we find this out. I kind of forgot, but we'll just say it now. The Master has tricked Trenchard into thinking that there's an enemy he's vague as to who for now, right. But he tricks Trenchard into thinking there's some sort of enemy force that's going to attack the area or declare war or something.
Yeah, and he says that they're the ones who've been stealing his ships.
Yeah, he's intentionally vague about this, by the way.
Yeah, that becomes a major plot point too. But anyway, the monster reveals that he has also figured out the fort is exactly at the center of all the ships disappearing, so he figures that that's where he needs to contact. So he basically decides he needs to get some electronic equipment from the naval base.
Yeah, he decides this like 3 times in this serial. But yeah, I just wanted to mention, like, I forget if it was the doctor or the master, but when they were describing how the fort is right in the middle of everything, they sort of drew this triangle on the map, and I
Yeah.
was like, maybe this plot was inspired by, the Bermuda Triangle or something,
Maybe.
possibly.
Malcolm Hulke. Who knows what he's inspired by?
But yeah, the master needs to go to the base, which he does.
With Trenchard, and Trenchard goes into Hart's office and distracts Hart by talking about this upcoming golf match they have going on.
Right, and I thought that Hart was potential. Like, while watching this scene, I thought Hart was potentially in on it with Trenchard and the Master. Like, I thought the golf match was sort of code or a euphemism for the plan. And like, I thought Hart might have been wanting to drop out, and Trenchard was trying to convince him not to. Like, you really should go to this golf match, Hart. It'd be a shame if you couldn't come.
Well, except Trenchard was spinning it like, yeah, no, it's totally fine if you don't come. Like, I can just find someone else. Like, you really don't need to come, Hart.
Yeah, I thought he was being all passive aggressive and not passive aggressive, but
Interesting
sort of a
theory.
subtle threat.
Interesting.
But no, that doesn't happen at all.
No.
He's actually just distracting him because the master is right outside.
And Joe conveniently is looking at the window and spies the monster. He's like, Doctor, look, it's the monster. Of course, he's gone by the time the doctor gets to the window, but the doctor believes Joe.
Which I thought was interesting because, maybe at the beginning of the Third Doctor's run, he might not have believed, I guess it would have been Liz back then, but he might not have believed his companion
Yeah.
without seeing it with his own eyes because he doesn't see the master.
Yeah. So he tells Hart that it's a very dangerous man. They need to go down and investigate. The monster had previously knocked out someone in the electronic storage.
Yeah, he tries to hypnotize someone. It doesn't work for whatever reason, so he just knocks him out.
Yeah. And they find the knocked out guy, and then Hart's like, well, I guess there really is someone on the base, so let's go catch him. But it's too late. They've already gone back to the prison.
Yeah, this is where Hart starts to turn around a little bit and start to trust the Doctor. Mm-hmm. And because by the end, he's totally on board with the Doctor.
They form a bromance.
Not really.
Sort of.
No, not really.
So the Doctor and Joe decide to go back to the fort to see the monster. Right? Yeah.
The prison.
Yeah, the prison, sorry.
Because
not the fort.
Doesn't Trenchard... Well, they confront Trenchard and they tell him that they saw the master at the base, and he's like, no, the master's right in his cell, and he is. Mm-hmm. So they go down there to talk to him about what he was doing at the base. Mm-hmm. And the Doctor and the master get into an argument of sorts. And then there's this amazing scene where... Do you want to explain it? I think you liked it more than I did, so go ahead.
It's the best scene in Doctor Who so far, but basically, the monster, he starts out with he has a sword.
He starts off
with a gun, doesn't he?
I thought he threw a knife at the Doctor.
No, that's how it ends.
Oh, yeah.
I think he has a gun, because the Doctor's like, oh, you're going to kill me? But anyway, the Doctor disarms him, and then they both have swords, and then there's this, 3-minute long sword battle that was just amazing.
It was well choreographed, I'll say that. Compared to the other fights we've had, like Cal versus Za, Ian versus...
Wow, throwback.
Ian versus, God, what was his name? Ixta? I mean, this was actually interesting, and... It wasn't like the other fight scenes where I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just open
another window. No, it was actually intense and exciting.
And they actually use the environment, and because the Doctor goes behind that curtain and he loops around, and you realize, oh, it's a looping corridor or something, and
And then they even injected humor when the doctor has the master at knife point, and he's like, I really like sandwiches. He decides to eat some of the master's sandwiches, and he's like, well, you better enjoy it because it'll be your loss, doctor.
Yeah.
And they continue fighting.
He says, violent exercise always makes me hungry or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kind of swords these were. I think they're
called rapiers.
Well, I know there are, I think, 3 or 4 different types of fencing swords, and I know rapiers are one, and I know sabers are another. I don't know the other varieties, and I don't know how to tell them apart. But
Neither do I.
But these were fencing swords, if we didn't already mention that.
Yeah, and then I guess after the sandwich, the master kind of lunges at the doctor and catches him off guard, and he falls into a chair. And the master had to lunge because the doctor actually disarmed the master. Kind of lunges, the doctor falls over, and then I was like, well, it looks like I won because he disarms the master. And then the master pulls out a knife and throws it at the doctor, and then episode 2 ends.
Right, and I think, don't we see him strap on the concealed knife earlier? I think we do. So it's not just like an out-of-nowhere thing. We actually see it.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise if it was just out of nowhere. It is the master.
Yeah. It's not like I would have complained if it was out of nowhere. Like, what? He just took a knife out of nowhere? No.
Anyway,
doesn't make sense.
Episode 3 starts with the entire fight scene again. So it's like a 3-minute recap.
Hey, I watched it again.
Yeah, I mean, I did too. We forgot to mention clangers. That was in episode 2.
Right. We should probably discuss that because I thought it was great. So the episode 2, I guess, ran 90 seconds or so under time. So they had to inject some sort of filler scene. So they had the master watching this stop motion animation thing on TV with these space mice, which turns out that's actually a real program from the BBC back in the 60s and 70s called Clangers, about these rodent type things that live on, I don't think it's ever explicitly stated to be the moon, but I think it's sort of implied to be the moon. And, it was a real thing with 10-minute episodes. And they're actually bringing it, but there were 2 seasons in the 60s, and season 2 ended in 1972, and they're actually bringing it back for a 3rd season, I learned, this year. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to that. I kind of want to watch it now.
Yeah, well, I mean, before you found out it was clangers, you were like, hey, they should do a spin-off of those space mice. It'd be way better than the actual show. Turns out it already exists, so
yeah,
your wish was granted before you even knew. But anyway, episode 3. So the fight happens. Turns out the monster misses with the knife.
Surprise, surprise. The doctor's about to die in the cliffhanger, and whoever's aiming at him misses. Haven't seen that 20 times already.
Well, I mean, you haven't seen someone throw a knife at the doctor before, so
I'm just... I don't want to say tired, because I don't really care in the long run, but we've gotten so many cliffhangers where, oh no, the doctor's going to die in the next episode, when he's obviously not.
I think it's just worse for us because we watched the episodes the next day, but when it was airing, they had to keep people involved because it was going to be a whole week before the next episode airs.
Still, you're not going to, it's not really a cliffhanger after it's been done so many times where, like, the doctor, even if you're watching it a week apart, the doctor's going to escape somehow.
Well, I guess the appeal of the cliffhanger is not finding out that the doctor lives, but finding out how he gets out of the cliffhanger. Since he's going to live, but how? Like, in every situation, it looks almost doomsday type, but then, the doctor has to live, so you watch the next week to find out how.
Kind of. Even the appeal of that, like, maybe discussing, how's the doctor going to get out of this one? Even the appeal of that disappears after a while, in my opinion, but whatever.
We're just shotgunning our way through the show, and I think you're just feeling the effects more quickly than if you were to watch it week to week.
Well, I'm not even a fan of cliffhanger endings, but yeah, no, I don't really like how they feel that they have to shoehorn a cliffhanger into every episode. Or maybe they can end it on a more subtle cliffhanger, like not, oh no, someone's gonna die, or something.
I mean,
sometimes they do, actually.
Sometimes I think possibly the writers even feel that way, and I think that it's just kind of forced upon them because of the nature of the show that they have to do that.
Maybe.
It's just kind of a thing they have to do, I guess. Like, whether or not people liked it or not, I guess. Like, even if we didn't like it, I think they would have some sort of evidence backing up the fact that the cliffhangers worked to some aspect, and that's why they would keep doing it. I don't think they keep doing it if it was just losing them viewers.
Well, if they were to lose significant ratings in any given episode, I don't think they'd immediately attribute it to the fact that there was a cliffhanger. But that's a whole other discussion, so I don't think we need to get into that. But anyway, where were we?
Right. Before the doctor went in to talk to the master, he had told Joe to actually leave and go to Unit to get Unit involved because, the Brig's gonna bring in the big guns. It's gonna bring in the big guns. Hey, that was real bad. That was real bad.
And yeah, I think now I can expand upon what I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, is that the Sea Devils / I liked calling them the Sea Lurians, but they don't really play. They're introduced, but they don't really play a prominent role. And I think they kind of fell into like Terror of the Autons area because the Master kind of steals the spotlight in this serial. And
I think that was the point, though. I think this was designed through and through to be a Master serial and not a Sea Devil serial.
Yeah, I still didn't. I think they could have.
I mean, because the Sea Devils were never the main villain in this serial. Like, they never put themselves out there as the main antagonist. Whereas in the Terror of the Autons, the way the Terror of the Autons was written, it was to imply the Autons were the main villain. Whereas in this serial, I felt like there wasn't a point where the Sea Devils were explicitly the villain. Everything they did was pushed on by the Master.
Yeah, but I wish they did get their own serial. Because, I as you know, I really liked the Silurians, and I want to see more of them, and I want to see them expanded upon. And they didn't exactly do much until the final 2 episodes. I'm not saying that this serial should have been written any differently. Just maybe...
I think this was one of the better written serials of the 3rd Doctor's run, at least.
Well, it was certainly more enjoyable than anything in his first season. And yeah, it's up there. I'd put it up there. But I just found some major problems with it that I guess you didn't. And I kind of wish they were just more expanded upon or given their own serial, and maybe there could have been another threat the Master was trying to utilize. Who knows?
I think it's because this serial was written as a how do we get the Master out of prison so he can like be a reoccurring character again? Because I think when they locked him up in prison, they're like, wait a minute, we can basically never use him again unless we bust him out of prison.
They could have just gone the route they did in the Axons, where you never find out how he escapes.
They could have, but I think people would have been annoyed. Like, what? Like,
yeah, that would have been...
that would have been way more annoying than the Axon thing.
Yeah, I guess, because it would have seemed more like a plot hole than the Axon thing, because...
Yeah.
With the Axons, it's sort of a... it's not really a concrete concept, like, okay, he's locked up in prison now. No, it's like... I don't want to say this, but I'm going to anyway. A timey-wimey kind of thing.
Well, you're the first person to use it on the show.
Were we trying not to?
No. And you have that award now.
All right.
I guess we just hand out awards now. We'll talk more about the Sea Devils when we finish this serial. And by that I mean when we finish explaining what the heck happens in the serial.
What were we even talking about? Jeez.
Yeah, so Joe is trying to escape, and Trenchard has basically put all guards on high alert, and Joe has just gotten to the car when the guards are like, nope, can't let you in. And then Joe does one of the best things she's done since her introduction as a companion and actually fights off the guards and makes a break for it, and gets away.
Yeah, she knocks out 2 guards.
I guess she's been learning Venusian Aikido from the Doctor.
Which they go back and forth again in this serial, I think, between Aikido and karate. Or maybe not within this serial, but I think they call it karate in this serial where, they've switched in the past. But
maybe the Doctor knows both.
Maybe they're both the same thing and we just don't know it.
Maybe. Yeah, so Joe now becoming her own character, at least, and not just a pretty face to look at.
Well, there was that other thing later. Maybe that already happened. I don't even know. But the thing where she like kneels down on the ground or whatever, the Doctor pushes the dude.
That's later.
Okay.
That's coming
That
up.
was just funny. I actually had a problem with that too.
What? Could you have a problem with that? We're about to get to that, actually. But I think at this point that Joe is kind of making her way around the base, but Hart is getting suspicious. So he comes, he talks to Trenchard. Trenchard's like, nah, we don't have the doctor. He went back to London, I promise, because Trenchard had radioed them that the doctor and Joe were going straight to London after visiting the prison. But the boat or the scooter or whatever didn't get returned, so that's why Hart thinks it's a bit suspicious that they would leave without returning that. So he thinks that they're still at the prison, rightfully so. But Trenchard somehow gets him off his case, so to speak, I guess. And then Joe finally makes it to the window because the doctor's now been locked in the master's cell, and the master is working with Trenchard on his device thing.
Which I guess we don't know what it is yet. But, the doctor and Joe devise a plan to escape from the cell. Well, it's more like a room. But,
entirely non-vocal communication, too, which was impressive. They don't talk about their plan until it's happening. Huh. Kind of a we're doing it live thing.
But yeah, what happens is the doctor calls in one of the guards for whatever reason. I guess he just convinces the guard to come into the room. So the guard does, and Joe follows him in, sneakily just kneels on the ground behind him. The doctor pushes the guard, he trips over Joe, and they make their escape. Which, my problem with this was, why did they have to do the whole kneel on the ground and push him thing? Was it just for comedic effect? Like, couldn't Joe have just knocked him out from behind?
Maybe Joe wasn't that powerful.
She knocked out 2 guards in hand-to-hand combat later.
I don't think...
And she didn't knock them out, but she incapacitated them for a bit. Because they aren't like out cold, but...
Well, she wasn't really strong enough to knock them out. The doctor couldn't knock him out because the doctor's hands were still handcuffed to his chair when he pushed the guy over. I think that's why they had to push him over, because the doctor couldn't just pull out some Aikido and be like, "Hiya!"
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, it was funny, don't get me wrong, but my main complaint was I just, in my mind, Joe could have just knocked him out. But anyway, I'm nitpicking.
Yeah.
Anyway, they make their escape, and
the monster's like, "It's okay, Trenchard, we'll just use this device I have. We'll call up the peeps. Just send the guards off to them," and then episode 3 ends when the doctor and Joe are hanging out on the beach, trapped on one side by the Sea Devils, on one side by a minefield, and on one side by the guards of the base.
Right, and I guess the Master's machine was some sort of remote reactivation unit thing.
Because I think it's the same machine he's expanding later.
That would make sense. Because, it's the Sea Devils, same with the Silurians, some of them are in hibernation.
Yeah, most of them are in hibernation. But, so the Doctor and Joe decide to run into the minefield, and turns out the sonic screwdriver can be used as a mine detector.
Convenient.
I mean, that's why they write out the sonic screwdriver later, because it was becoming too much of a plot convenience.
Well, they did write themselves into it being too much of a convenience, so there you have it.
Yeah, they just blow it up in the 5th Doctor's run, and he just never gets another one till the reboot. During which hopefully doesn't become what it is now. Oh boy. Anyway, I think the Silurian just runs away. Like, it ventures, I think, a little bit into the minefield. Well, what happens was the Sea Devils. The guards run away because the Sea Devils are there, and they're scared of the Sea Devils. And then the Sea Devils chase the Doctor and Joe, but the Doctor can also remote detonate the mines with his sonic screwdriver, so the Sea Devils run away because they don't want to get blown up, Reasonable.
It was just one following him, though. I don't know what happened to the other ones.
They're fighting the guards, I guess, off screen. But the Doctor and Joe make it back to the base.
And then, I'll admit, I'm blurry as to what happens next.
I think what happens is that the monster gets taken back to his cell, calls up the Sea Devils, they show up, kill off a bunch of guards, and the monster escapes.
Yeah, there's a...
And Trenchard sacrifices himself.
Yeah, Trenchard dies.
Because Trenchard thought he was working against enemy agents, like we say, because the monster was vague about it. And then when he finds out it's these creatures from under the water, he's like, "Monster, what? Monster, why?" And then Yeah.
Well, the master explains to him, like, well, he says, like, would you have believed me if I had told you this? And Trenchard's like, no, I wouldn't have. So you can't really blame Trenchard for not believing him. You can certainly blame him for siding with the dangerous criminal that he was supposed to keep under lock and key. But yeah, he ends up dying. And, the master has his own personal army of Silurians.
Sea Devils.
Sea Devils, whatever, now. And, he's planning on using them. He reveals this a little bit later, I guess. But I'll just say it now. He's planning on using them to throw Earth into chaos like he normally wants to.
And meanwhile, all this is going on, Captain Hart has actually sent a submarine to investigate the fort. Since the Doctor's kind of gone missing, he's like, well, maybe the Doctor was onto something. So he sends the super top secret submarine to go investigate the fort, and that gets attacked by Sea Devils. Now you got me doing it! In episode 3, actually.
There's a lot of stock footage with this submarine, too.
Is it stock? I think they filmed it specifically for this serial, because I read that because they worked with the Navy on this serial, which we haven't mentioned yet.
Oh, right.
They worked with the Navy on this serial, and that submarine that they implied was super secret in the serial, the actual, Department of Defense of England showed up at the BBC, a week after that. It was like, how did you know about our submarine? And they're like, we didn't. This is just a model that we made up. So that's pretty sketch.
I think the footage of the missiles launching was definitely stock footage, though.
Yeah, I mean, I
don't
guess
think
they
they'd
didn't
have
launch
the budget
actual missiles. Well, it did go over budget on special effects, so maybe it was.
But would they have gotten permission to launch missiles for one episode of a TV show? No, it was. I guess they did launch torpedoes too, but there were the missiles. Remember the ground to air things?
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, the submarine gets attacked
and goes missing, according to Hart, because Hart doesn't know where it is. They lose contact with the mainland.
It's
that all happened in episode 3.
Marauded by, I don't know if that's the right term. It's taken over by Sea Devils.
Right. But they capture it and take it, and
the Sea Devils on the submarine don't talk for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know why, because they can.
Well, anyway, we'll just brush that aside. So the Doctor and Joe make it back to Captain Hart, and at this point, someone high up has arrived.
Yeah, I don't remember his name, actually, if I ever knew it in the first place, but he's kind of a jerk for the most part.
He's doing what he thinks is right. He's trying to protect his country.
Well, he first shows up, and he's like, well, yeah, we're going to get rid of this menace with some depth charges, so where's my breakfast?
Yeah, okay. He was just a dick in the social sense, too. I thought you meant just about killing all the Sea Devils off.
That too, kind of, but I can see why he wanted to do that, but...
Yeah. Which we'll talk about when we finish the serial, because he kind of goes overboard with that at the end, but anyway. Just drop a nuke on the base, but anyway.
Well, like you thought that everyone should have listened, or at least Peladon should have listened to the Doctor last serial, I think more people should have listened to the Doctor in this serial.
They should have, yeah.
They didn't.
Hart did, which was good, because Hart, once again, there's always that character who becomes the Doctor's biggest ally in these serials. But Hart actually listens to the Doctor and agrees to let the Doctor go down in a diving bell to see the Sea Devils and discuss stuff.
Yeah, they sort of hold... Did you know his name? The military politician dude? Because I didn't. They... Sort of Walker?
He actually shows up in episode 5. Because he shows up when the Doctor's been down there. Because the Doctor goes down, and episode 4 ends when the diving bell comes up, and the Doctor's nowhere to be found.
Right,
that's the kind of cliffhanger you would stay for, well, what happened to the Doctor?
Yeah, I understand that, and I liked it. I mean...
Turns out the Sea Devils captured him.
Yeah, which was my first guess, but...
And I don't know why it wouldn't be.
Anyway, yeah, Walker is his name.
And starts bombing the base right as the Doctor has the Sea Devils in his hands. So the Doctor's the Doctor and the Master kind of go back and forth trying to convince the Sea Devils to trust their side.
Right, the Master's down the Sea Devils base too.
I love the Daemons and
Colony in Space, kind of. Kind of.
Not as much, though. But they're about to believe the Doctor, and this is where the Master actually mentioned the whole genocide of that Silurian base.
Which was the brig.
Right, but at least they brought it up. I'm glad that they used a cousin of the Silurians and didn't just brush aside the fact that the brig murdered a bunch of them.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't specifically expecting them to do that in this episode. It's not like I went in with the expectation that, okay, they're not going to mention the Silurians, but at the same time, I'm more surprised that they did than I would have been if they hadn't, if that makes sense. Basically, I'm surprised they even mentioned it at all.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. And we also didn't mention a scene earlier where the Doctor actually mentions that Silurian is a misnomer, which was an error.
The reason they did that is because a whole bunch of fans wrote in, like, that's a misnomer. So Malcolm Hulke's like, well, you know what? I'll just put it in the show that it's a misnomer, and now you can't say anything anymore.
Well, do you think he was that aggressive about it, or was he like, hey, good call, guys. I guess I'll throw in that they're actually from the Ionian period or whatever it was?
I feel like it was a mix of both.
Wasn't it? Was it actually a misnomer in the Silurians, or was it intentional? It was? Mm-hmm. I didn't remember. I thought it might have been intentional for some reason. Maybe they just thought Silurian sounded way cooler than Ionian. It was Ionian, right?
I think you mentioned that in the actual episode.
Yeah, I might have. I don't exactly remember. But either way, yeah, they're going back and forth. And this is one of the most low-budget bases. It was literally just a black room.
They were running out of budget, man. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of the Sea Devils were actually different. There were like enough subtle differences between them that they were kind of like, humans. You can tell a person from a person. You could tell some of the Sea Devils apart from the other ones.
Sure?
Yes, I'm actually sure of this because in episode 6 there were two Sea Devils next to each other who had very different facial structures. And maybe that's just a mistake in the costume department.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't catch that at all, but I'll go back and look at that. That's interesting. Maybe it's sort of something like, they say you can only tell your own species apart. Like, it's hard to identify for humans. Like as a real life example, for us, it's hard to identify. Okay, maybe between two dogs, if they're the same breed and everything, they look similar. But for them, they can easily identify. And maybe it's sort of the same thing. We're like, okay, they all look the same to us, and maybe the Doctor and the Master kind of look the same to them.
Yeah. So anyway, the Walker decides to start bombing the base right as the Doctor has them convinced that he can help them, that he can put together a peace treaty. He actually uses a line that I think that was just directly lifted from the Silurians that, those places that humans don't go deep in the water, you can have those. Which in the Silurians is like, those hot places that we don't go, you can have those.
Well, it's pretty much the same idea. I mean, I can understand why you would say that.
Yeah. But anyway, so that totally fails, and he's about to be killed, but he makes an escape, takes a gun, breaks out the people who were running the submarine, and they make a break for the submarine.
Yeah, we didn't mention the Silurians...
Sea Devils.
Sea Devils. After they're convinced, that's when the base gets bombed. The Master's like, see, they're hostile. And their Silurians are like, yeah.
Sea Devils.
Sea Devils, God. I'll just call them Silurians, which is how I credited them in my death count. Which goes through the roof in episode 6, by the way.
Episode 6, I don't think we started keeping track of how many deaths per episode. We had just been doing serials for a long time. But I think episode 6 might have the most deaths per episode for a long time, since probably the invasion. The invasion had a lot. Like right at the end.
And so did the Daleks' master plan, I think it was.
Yeah.
This, just looking at sheer space on the hard copy paper we have here of the death count, I think is probably more than at least Dalek Invasion of Earth. But anyway, we'll get there in a minute. Yeah,
so they escape in the submarine. Actually, the Master gets the Sea Devils to create a force field around the submarine. They they decide the only way to get out is to launch torpedoes back at the base to launch themselves out, which works, and they get out and they make it back to the base. And the Doctor goes off on Walker for bombing the place.
Yeah, this is what I was saying before, like, his personality isn't completely reversed, so it's still, the third Doctor still has his differences from the second and first.
I think the difference is he's a lot more adamant about succeeding every time, and when someone messes up his plan, he goes off on them a lot more because of that. Because
he probably just holds himself to higher standards, I guess.
Yeah.
Whether that's intentional, whether that was intentionally written.
I'm just waiting to see him return to traveling to other planets that aren't Earth and seeing what happens then.
We've had a few serials here and there, but yeah, I see what you mean.
Because I think part of his personality, I think we talked about before, has come from him being forced into living on Earth for an extended period of time. Which is why I want to see what happens when he starts traveling again, to see if his personality changes at that point or not.
This is only semi-related, but I actually liked the setting of the serial. I tend to like
I really enjoyed the
stuff.
setting of this serial.
Yeah, I mean, it mostly
we haven't even finished describing the serial.
Didn't take place on solid ground. So, anyway. God.
So, anyway, we're getting near the end, thankfully, that the Sea Devils, the Doctor had managed to convince Walker that he can create peace with the Sea Devils, only for them to immediately attack the base right then and there, under the command of the Master, take it over, and then the Master reveals he needs the Doctor's help. Why the Master always trusts the Doctor building things for him, I don't know. But it's worked so wonderfully for him before.
Well, he does have some sort of deep-seated obsession with the Doctor, to be honest.
Yes, yeah.
Because his life's mission is to mess with the Doctor. Or so it seems, at least.
At least he has a strong motivation. We see too many villains in this show that don't have strong motivations.
Hey, Hepesh was pretty good.
He had a strong motivation. Still doesn't make him the best villain.
Anyway, that's better saved
for Lost Week.
Yeah. Anyway, episode 6, I guess kind of falls into territory that we've discussed before, where 4-episode serials are probably ideal.
I actually think this is one of the best 6-episode serials we've had. Like, if you compare it only to 6-episode serials, like, forget any 4-episode serial we've seen so far. This is probably one of the best 6-episode serials we've had. I mean, just think back to the third Doctor's first season. We had Inferno, which just kind of petered out at the end. We had Ambassadors of Death, which just kind of lost steam too. We had the Silurians, which was also written by Malcolm Hulke, so...
I'd put this and the Silurians, at least in terms of third Doctor serials, up there if you're only looking at 6-episode serials. Yeah. So, in terms of only 6-episode third Doctor serials, just quite a few contingencies, but... I don't know, yeah, it wasn't... Like I said, it wasn't my favorite third Doctor serial, but... Either way, episode 6 launches right into this huge montage of death.
Well, what happens is that the Doctor messes with the machine, and it emits this high-pitched tone that all the Sea Devils seem to hate, which weird continuity thing. Somehow Jo and Hart take 4 minutes to escape, but it looks like the Sea Devil only turned off the device like 3 seconds after the Doctor turned it on.
Yeah. I noticed that too, actually.
But anyway, so Jo and Hart escape in a hovercraft. Like, where did that come from?
Hey, it's set in the future. Everyone knows they have hovercrafts.
No, it's set in the 70s.
Yeah, but it's still the future. It's like specifically set in the near future.
Yeah, like 2 years in the future.
Yeah, everyone knows they have hovercrafts in the future.
Those hovercrafts...
Doesn't matter when the future is. If it's the future, they have hovercrafts.
Anyway, they come back with reinforcements, and this big battle occurs.
Okay, I just want to mention, there were a few deaths in a row, and I might save adding to the death count until the end of the episode at times if there's only a few deaths and I think I can keep track of it. But sometimes, when there's a couple deaths in a row, I'm like, okay, I'll just pause it and, jot them down so I don't forget. This episode, I would write a name down, play the episode for maybe 1 or 2 seconds, and then have to pause it again to jot down another name. So that's how many deaths there were.
See, what I do is for every death, I just write down the number of the death, and then I just remember if it was Sea Devil or Soldier or whatever, and then when the death is stopped, I just write in what it was. So I keep track of the numbers game, and then I just write in the names later.
Yeah, I guess that works because
I write it down on a hard copy.
Yeah, and I don't keep track of the numbers.
But I want to say, it started overwhelming me. I was writing numbers too slowly for the serial. You can see my numbers start blending into each other at some point. But if you want to see how much death there was, you should go to the website and just look at the death count just for the serial, because it's insane.
The Sea Devils also had some pretty humorous deaths, too. Like, when they would die, they'd spin around and make these weird high-pitched sounds. I don't know why or how or
Anyway,
what.
The Doctor and the machine the Monster's building is this device to reawaken all the other Sea Devil bases. So...
Right. Also, I just want to mention, by the way, that they employed a tank against on-foot Sea Devils, which is a little bit overkill-esque. Anyway.
I actually thought that scene was hilarious, where Hart is just in a tank gunning down Sea Devils, and the Doctor runs up like, "Have you seen Jo?" And he's like, "She's on the beach somewhere," and he just continues gunning down Sea Devils in the tank. But anyway, the Doctor gets captured and taken with the monster to the Sea Devil base because they need to plug in the device into the Sea Devil's power frame so they can reawaken all the other Sea Devils.
Right.
So the Doctor tries once again to convince the Sea Devils to live peacefully with the humans. The monster undermines him again. I guess the Doctor's lost words to the Sea Devils are, "I'm sorry," which doesn't make sense until about, 5 minutes later. Ish, like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So the monster gets double-crossed by the Sea Devils and like, "Well, thanks for your help, monster. Take him to the prison with the Doctor."
Well, he was only using them to fulfill his own goals, so I guess he kind of got what was coming to him.
Yeah, but
yeah, they're thrown into this cell, which looks like every other room in the area.
although a lot more compact.
Yeah. And the Doctor reveals that he's messed with the machine, and he says a signature line to,
The only time he's used the entire signature line, actually, besides the 5 Doctors.
Yeah.
The entire line of reverse the polarity of the neutron flow.
Right.
He uses reverse the polarity a lot, but this is the only time besides 5 Doctors he says the whole line.
Yeah, I think the last time he said it was the Daemons.
He says, yeah, something like that.
You said that he said it before that. I don't remember it.
Fairly certain he did.
But either way, the Master's like, "Wait, what? You did what, Doctor?" No! No!
Well, not like that.
Yeah, no, he's actually more calm about it.
Yeah, because the Doctor is surprisingly calm about it, because I guess he's like, well, I take out my biggest enemy, and I save the entire human race. Like, I think he's come to terms with the fact that if he dies there, he's okay with it.
Right, we didn't mention that it's gonna blow everything up, did we?
No.
Yeah, it's going to do that.
Yeah, it's gonna basically destroy the entire base. Meanwhile, Walker has decided he's gonna drop a nuke on the base.
Yeah.
But that's just a cutaway, so we'll go back to the Doctor and the Monster. The Doctor's just kind of smug about it. He's like, unless you help me escape, we're both gonna die here with all the Sea Devils.
So, guess what they employ to get out of there?
Yeah, it's not like Screwdriver.
Yeah, so they make their escape, and back at the base, they notice underwater tremors. I guess they're picking up some sort of vibrations.
Yeah.
And Hart's like, "What? I can't believe you dropped the nuke. Damn it, Walker." And he's like, "No, the nuke isn't scheduled to drop for another couple of minutes." And they're like, "Oh, well then what's going on?"
We forgot to mention how distraught Jo has been throughout the serial, because every time the Doctor goes to the fort alone and she hears about everyone dying, she gets all distraught about the Doctor being dead.
And then Walker usually makes this comment, well, like, "That's war."
Yeah, like, what? Thanks, Walker.
Yeah, I still don't care too much for Jo, though. She's alright. I don't hate her.
She's...
I kind of did hate her
The
last serial.
thing
but
I noticed in this serial is that Jo is becoming more like the Doctor, and the Doctor's becoming more like Jo. Jo's becoming a lot more proactive in doing things, and the Doctor's becoming less... not as headstrong about... He doesn't blunder into things blindly.
I'll at least concede that Jo has become a lot better at not flat out ruining things. But
We're going to be sad to see Jo go, because she's been an instrumental part of his character development. Whether you love or hate her, she's been instrumental to the Third Doctor.
yeah, I bet I'll be about as... I don't know if sad is the right term, but it's really the only thing I can think of. So I don't know if I'll be as sad. I think I'll be about as sad as, when Zoe left or when Victoria left. Probably.
I guess it's also going to come down to how good of a write-out she gets.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not Liz Shaw tier.
That doesn't even count as a write-out, okay?
But we'll see. I know when she gets written out, actually. I don't know if I've mentioned it on the show, but I know.
I think you have.
Okay. Well, I'm reiterating it now. So...
Pretty sure I've borderline spoiled for when she's leaving for me. But anyway, the Doctor and the Monsters show up. They radio into headquarters and like, we found 2 bodies, and Joe's like, who are they? Is it the Doctor? And they're like, well, they didn't say. So they go out there and they find out it's the Doctor and the Monster, and the Monster immediately collapses inside the hovercraft. And then the Doctor makes it to land and has a joyous reunion with Joe. And then they bring out the Monster, and they're like, he's dead.
So yeah, the Master just flat out dies. Like, that's the end of him.
Yeah, he must have drowned or something. No, just kidding. He's just a guy with a monster face mask on, and then they look up, and the monster's in the hovercraft, and he waves to the Doctor and drives away. And it ends. It just ends right there. Yep. He drives away.
I kind of liked the ending. Well, as we mentioned back
Monster being his trickster self again.
Yeah. It's kind of like what they did in the last season, where the end note of every serial is the Master showing up like, haha, I'm not actually gone.
Yep.
And I don't know. I still do. Well, I don't know if I'd say I like the Master more than the Third Doctor at this point. Anymore, but I think they're kind of even in my books. I at least like their dynamic, I'll say that. And
yeah, they have a cool dynamic that is pretty unique in the show in terms of how far we've gotten, at least.
Yeah, well, the Doctor really hasn't had a rival character foil type thing.
There was the monk.
Yeah, no.
There was the Great Intelligence.
That
could have been so much more.
It could have, but I still don't think I would have viewed it as a rival in the same sense that the Master is. It's sort of like a transcendent being type of thing, rather than an actual...
It's a great old one.
Whatever. I don't think that term has been introduced yet.
Yeah, I don't think it gets introduced for a long time. Maybe not till the Curse of Fenric. Because I've heard Fenric is a great old one. Thanks to me having to spoil a bunch of 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctor stuff for me for club that I'm officially vice president of now, but anyway. Luckily I've forgotten most of those spoilers.
Yeah, we'll see.
That's not a, like, I'm just saying I forgot for the people listening to think I forgot. That's an actual I've forgotten.
Yeah, when we get closer and when things start to hint at what's to come, you'll probably remember.
Maybe, but that's at least like a year down the line, so I think at that point it won't.
Yeah, maybe.
But anyway, yeah, so it was I really enjoyed the serial. It was fun to watch.
I said it was mediocre. I don't think I was... Well, I don't think that's exactly the right description of it. I didn't flat out love it. I didn't flat out hate it either, but I thought it was a higher end, middle of the road serial, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Sort of out of the bunch of mediocre serials, it was sort of like in the high end of the bunch. But I did like how it sort of established that the Doctor, not sort of established it, did establish it, even if it was just one random line, that the Doctor and the Master were former allies. I hope they go into that more.
They reference it in the reboot a couple times. So if it doesn't show up in the classic series, you can at least look forward to the fact that they reference it in the reboot.
Well, hopefully they go more into it other than just referencing it, because I don't want to go, like, 40
Well, I don't want to
years.
spoil too much for you.
Okay. Yeah, don't say anything, but hopefully, I'm hoping they go more into it rather than just references. At least.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Depends what happens with the coming serials and Mr. Delgado himself.
Right. Are we going to mention... Well, we'll mention that one. Okay.
I think this serial featured a lot of those Malcolm Hulke traits that we're used to, that not black or white serial, where it's kind of a situation where you don't really know who's in the right. And I think that comes into play mainly because the Sea Devils weren't the main antagonists, but the humans believed that they were. So, we get the character of Walker, who's basically willing to do anything to just kill them all off.
Like the Silurians, for most of it, until the end when the Upstart comes along. I like how we're officially calling him the Upstart, by the way.
Well, I think this serial played off of the Silurians well, in that it used it as a plot point to undermine the Doctor's efforts to convince the Sea Devils to be peaceful. And then, again, I think the Doctor, in his, when he says, "I'm sorry," I think he realizes that in this moment, I think in that point he kind of comes to the realization that he kind of understands what the Brig did in the Silurians, since he's kind of forced to make the same decision himself.
It's kind of a different context, though. I wouldn't say they're analogous, really.
I think he at least understands better what the Brig was doing at that point.
The Brig did it in cold blood somewhat. At least more than the Doctor, you have to concede.
The Brig was also acting on orders above his head. So...
Yeah, that's why I don't think it's exactly analogous, because of what we already said. And the Brig is a military guy, whereas the Doctor's kind of just acting on his own. Despite, I guess, being formerly a member of UNIT, but...
He's on UNIT's payroll, isn't he? They don't pay him, I think,
feeding him.
I think they just feed him, because I think he just lives in the TARDIS.
But, yeah, I think that's all I really had to say about this serial. And
pretty much all I had to say. I don't know when the monster comes back officially this time.
Me neither.
So we'll actually get surprised, even though they introduced him in the first, 5 minutes of this serial, so...
Yeah, we didn't mention, but we both knew he was coming back. Yeah, I think we can mention the retrospective now.
Yeah, so, if you'll recall, it was episode 63, in which we mentioned that we'd specifically recorded a Susan retrospective and that we had planned for it to go out that Wednesday. At least that was what we were shooting for. It didn't come out that Wednesday. Obviously, if you were subscribed to YouTube, you would know that. I actually ended up finishing it on Friday and was going to go out on Saturday. I left it overnight to render and was going to go out on Saturday. It was going to all be fine and dandy. But we hit kind of a roadblock in that I uploaded it. YouTube was like, "You're using copyrighted footage. We're not allowed to show this anywhere in the world." Which I guess isn't really surprising, since the footage is copyrighted. But also, I guess we didn't expect YouTube to just immediately block it before it was even public.
Right, because there are clips from the show that aren't from BBC's official channel on YouTube that aren't blocked.
But maybe they're a different situation or something. I think where we stand right now is that we can contest the claims, but neither of us are masters of fair use and copyright law. So we don't know if we have a claim to contest with, I think, is the key point here. So kind of what's happening right now is we're kind of at the point where we're going to look into if we have any sort of claim to make and we can get the original version up and continue to make videos in that style using footage from the show, if indeed we do have a claim to do that legally. I mean, we're not monetizing these videos. We make no money off this podcast. We make no money off of our videos on YouTube because we don't run ads next to our videos on YouTube. But because we still want to at least get the Susan retrospective out there, because I think we said a lot of interesting things, and I think we want to drive people to the YouTube channel for anything future that we may do that doesn't involve footage from the show, like original projects that we may just upload to YouTube.
Right.
We are making
You.
me, official video editor. I'm making a version of the retrospective that doesn't use any footage, but instead uses still images and text to convey some of the points that we make.
Which is about the best you can do right now.
Yeah. It's taking a bit longer than expected, mainly because I've been busier than I thought in the past week since this happened, and I didn't really expect to have to re-edit the video a second time, but I'm trying to have a lot of fun with it. I'm trying to make it interesting to watch. So, I mean, I'm trying to put a lot of work into making people actually want to watch the video and not leave it in the background just running with us talking. So, that may come out this week. It may not. No promises, but I'm getting it out as soon as possible. And I think for now, we're just going to put the other retrospectives on hold for probably a month-ish until we figure out what we want to do with...
Or until we figure out what we can do.
Yeah, with the old video. But as of right now, we don't want to risk uploading another video that uses copyright material until we have the first one either cleared or not. Because under YouTube's guidelines, we don't have a copyright strike. I should make that clear. It's not a copyright strike. It was blocked on the fact that we used copyright footage, but there's no official claim against us. If we get another video blocked worldwide, specifically worldwide, then we're not allowed to upload videos of unlimited length anymore because our account won't be in good standing, which would mean uploading the podcast episodes would kind of be a little bit of a disaster. So in order to kind of avoid that situation as of right now, we're not going to put anything up that uses copyrighted footage until that whole Susan retrospective debacle has been resolved.
Right.
And I think that's all we want to say on that right now. Just look for the still image version. Hopefully
coming out whenever.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll be interesting though. So I'm trying to make it interesting. I'm trying to make it fun to watch, even though we can't use like video. It's hard to convey points. Whereas in your original one, you have video of like scenes that you think are important to what we're saying, and now you can only use still images. But gotta get creative. Make do with what you got. I also had to edit what we were saying in the retrospective because originally we mentioned specifically the scene of the first Doctor saying goodbye to Susan, and now magically we don't. But anyway, so look for that, which is a good segue into subscribe to us on YouTube. So you can find out when that happens. I actually wanted to mention, before I continue that, for the past couple of weeks, we've been trying to add more production value to the show, which is why you may have noticed more music and sound effects within the show. Like, us sounding like Daleks in the Day of the Daleks. And I just wanted to put it out there that if you have feedback on that, or if you think it's too intrusive, then to email us. Keen-eared listeners may notice that the first time we mention the monster in an episode, I play Beethoven's Fifth, and I've been using increasingly longer segments of Beethoven's Fifth. But, so if you have any thoughts on that, you can email us at thedoctordecadentvegetable.com. That, or if you have rants, or if you like the show, if you hate the show, whatever, email us questions, we'll answer them. You can reach us at that email. And check out the website. Make sure to look at the death count for the serial because it's insane. That's on the website, and also you can subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating on iTunes if you like the show, or on YouTube, whatever.
And you can subscribe and like us on Facebook. And next time, we're watching The Mutants. But until then, the end.